Welcome to Milk Market Tidbits for the March Dairy Products Report that USDA released yesterday. This is Dr. Lawrence Jones with Farm Institute. I'm recording this on May 7th, Tuesday, because I was just now waiting for the global dairy trade information so I can include it in here. All right, so the Dairy Products Report is the last of the three major reports that we get for a month. Couple things, the quarterly reports for milk production had a lot of changes, and then USDA came out with a lot of changes with the annual report of dairy products. And I tried to get all those incorporated so that I've got current data for you. So this is kind of how the month comes together. What we're most interested in is how it actually came together. I'm not going to spend much time on this in particular, except to comment on the 29 million pounds of cheese that was exported, what I would call as additional export. And what was interesting is I'd come up with a value of 29,535,000 as an increase of the cold storage report, but it only was 967,000. So that difference was actually that 29 million pounds that got extra exported. Now, we need to remember that this was exported in March. March cheese price was $1.61 and the global dairy trade was $1.92. So this would suggest that it takes about 30 cents to get it offshore to be able to get a lot of exports. And usually I use 20 to 25 cents. This is the latest global dairy trade. It was actually up 1.8%. There were some estimates that it might be down. Cheddar was actually up 8%. And so when we look at where we are right now, on the world market, cheddar is $1.93. Our spot market yesterday was $1.84. That's only about a 10-cent difference. So it's going to be hard to be exporting that. Butter, we're at 308, so we're not looking at the world market at all for that. Non-fat dry milk, $1.23, didn't really change. It takes more than 10 cents usually to get that offshore. So really right now, I would say we're probably out of the export market. And this global dairy trade represented about 70 cents to our blend price. So let's look at some graphs here that kind of show everything. This is the ratio of cheese to milk, and I'm assuming 10 pounds of milk to make a pound of cheese. So we were 6.25, which means about 62.5% of the milk went into cheese. That was below what I call normal and below the trend line. Daily cheese production has really been flat for the last 3 years. I think partly we had some new cheese plants in here. We're waiting for new cheese plants to get built. The other ones are running pretty well at capacity. So daily cheese production has not had a significant change over the last 3 years. This is probably my favorite graph when we get the dairy products report because I can go back and begin looking at disappearance. And disappearance is very hard to look at. So what I do is a rolling number. So just take the average of the last 12 months. A couple things are obvious here. You know, we've been really flat. And in fact, the rolling disappearance is about 38.8 million pounds a day. And in fact, in March, we made 39.5. So again, that would suggest for about 700,000 pounds over disappearance per day in March. We can also get the stocks to use ratio. So right now we're about 37 and a half days of excess cheese in cold storage, and would suggest that we need cow numbers about 9.37 million. Right now we're about 9.35. So very close to kind of what we need, and so that would suggest no major shortage of cows or milk. This is the ratio of the different cheeses in production, and the Italian type cheeses have been declining, but they are always the biggest, and they actually have kind of come above this trend line. The American style cheeses, which includes cheddar, has been going up, but it's below the trend line, and cheddar by itself is below the trend line. So more cheese went into making Italian than would normally happen. Now, when we look at actual pounds as opposed to ratio, American cheese was actually a little bit higher than normal. When I call normal as my seasonal adjusted numbers. Question is, was this an outlier back here or is this an outlier here? And that's always the problem of people looking at year over year is it can really, an outlier a year ago can really mess up the numbers. Cheddar production has been relatively flat. Again, this is what I would call an outlier. It was not statistically an outlier. Back here was the statistical outlier, but overall it would appear that cheddar production has been flat with an exception of last year a little bit. Italian type cheeses were right where we expected them to be, so they were very normal, and last year was a statistical outlier. But this is still way below trend line, so I think this is coming down a little bit. Whey production was above normal, clear up here, above the trend line, so that would suggest there was a bunch of whey around. That's also suggesting that you're probably making a bunch of cheese compared to normal. Nonetheless, whey production was above the trend line and above normal. Want to take just a second to look at the spot cheese prices. What's been going on. We know we've had a big spike trade here recently. We had HPAI kind of first diagnosed somewhere in the middle of March, probably around the 15th is when we were suspecting something. The first diagnosis around the 25th. And then on the 5th of April, this thing just went parabolic. So if we go back and look at where the USDA numbers have been, and again, these are the USDA prices, $1.49, $1.84, $1.94. And it's amazing how stable these actually are, month to month, $1.62, $1.52. And so the question is, why is the spot market going up? And it's clearly a fact that fresh cheese is not coming to the market. So then the question becomes, is it because there's a shortage of milk? Or during March, was it because we made more Italian type cheeses and we had less milk going into cheese? And I suspect it's more of the latter, but we're going to have to find out. And there's a lot of fear built into the futures prices right now about a shortage of milk coming due to this bird flu. An interesting number is always how much fat does butter account for, and we were right on normal. If we look at fat percentages, because we got the egg prices, they just continue to rise way up. Butter production is very seasonal, and again, very normal, right on trend line. No big surprises there. The other thing that I like to look at is the pounds of butter relative to the pounds of non-fat dry milk made each month. Because what this will tell you is if this is fairly flat, it says butter powder plants are turning out powder and cream for butter all at the same time. When we see these big spikes up here, that means that cream is being used from other sources, skimming off class 1, skimming off some other things. And so we have far more butter being made than non-fat dry milk. So this is coming down. This was really high, but we're still above the trend line. And as I say, high values suggest that butter is being made from cream, not associated with non-fat dry milk. Along this line, it's interesting to look at how the value of butter is relative to non-fat dry milk. So if you've got 100 pounds of class 4, which would you rather make? Clearly butter. This time of year, it's always interesting to look at what's happening to ice cream. We are very seasonal, as you would expect, but we did not come up to the trend line, and so we're a little bit below normal on ice cream production. Interesting, if you look at yogurt production, it has been very flat for the last 3 years. We're right on kind of the normal line, but we're starting to fall below the trend line because, again, it's been very flat. All right, so right now we just got the global dairy trade, and part of the fear in the industry is we're not going to be getting milk production reports until the 20th, and so we've got a lot of time between where we are now and where we're going to end up before we know how bad the impact or not bird flu had on overall milk supply. All right, that's it for me. I'll get you another report probably when we get the milk production report.